Boa noite a todos. Queria desejar boas-vindas a todos aqui ao Midrash Centro Cultural, nessa noite para nós extremamente importante. We want to welcome our guests today, Mr. Daniel Libeskind, his wife Nina here with us. Also, we have Professor Zev Rothstein, the director and CEO of the Sheba Medical Center. I will explain a little of the connection of this night. We have here also Elaine Feldman, who is chairman of the Sheba Medical Center, Friends of the Sheba Medical Center. We have Mr. Stefan Bassett, who is executive director of the Sheba Medical Center, staff people from the Sheba Medical Center present here. E nós vamos ter a apresentação, né, para todos nós, muito importante, esse arquiteto que está tendo a responsabilidade de realizar a construção, né, a reconstrução de um espaço, né, tão importante para o planeta, né? É um espaço que, obviamente, exige inteligência no campo da arquitetura, qualidades específicas nesse campo, mas também aquele é um lugar de healing, é um lugar de cura, né, de uma ferida planetária. Portanto, uma responsabilidade incrível que está nas mãos do Daniel. E nós temos uma conexão muito importante aqui hoje, que é quem está nos permitindo, né, a presença dele aqui no Midrash hoje, é justamente o Sheba Medical Center, que é um centro de excelência em Israel, né, é um hospital que tem uma importância muito grande, não só pela sua dimensão, né, e vai ser explicado isso, mas um hospital que, numa região tão conflagrada, é um hospital que tem excelência na área de reabilitação, na área principalmente de pessoas que sofrem, né, ferimentos graves, e a conexão e a razão pela qual Sheba Medical Center está aqui nos trazendo Daniel Libeskind, é justamente o fato de que o mais novo projeto, né, que ele está realizando é justamente a construção de uma ala nesse centro médico, uma ala que tem como intenção se dedicar justamente a doenças, desordens, síndromes pós-traumáticas, né, naquela região. E Sheba Medical Center recebe não só pacientes que são israelenses, mas também dos territórios ocupados. Portanto, na região, aquele é o centro que tem como responsabilidade lidar com as coisas mais traumáticas. E o que esse novo projeto que vai ser mencionado aqui é um projeto que está dentro desse desejo daqueles que experimentam violência, sofrimento intenso, possam ter alguma forma de cura, né, nesse tratamento. E quando eles pensaram na construção de uma nova ala, eles imediatamente recorreram àquele que está tendo a responsabilidade de curar uma ferida planetária. E, portanto, essa é a conexão. Eles estão aqui numa missão no Rio de Janeiro para poder viabilizar essa ala do hospital, que tem um nome muito bonito, né? O Hopeful Dawn Institute, é o instituto do nascimento, né, da alvorada, né, da esperança, e que vai tratar diretamente dessas situações pós-traumáticas, né, de doenças e desordens pós-traumáticas. Então nós vamos ter uma construção aqui que vai ser da seguinte maneira. Eu vou estar, dentro de alguns instantes, passando a palavra, o Daniel Libeskind, que vai nos falar sobre o trabalho dele. Nós vamos ter um pequeno vídeo que ele vai mostrar. Nós vamos ter a apresentação dele e logo depois nós vamos ter, vou convidar também o professor Rothstein, que vai nos dirigir a palavra também. E ao término de tudo isso, nós vamos abrir para perguntas, para que a gente possa ter uma interação com todos vocês. Nós estamos juntos com mais 2 outros andares que espero nos escutam e nos veem nesse momento. A esses andares, a gente vai pedir que as pessoas, até o término da fala do Daniel Libeskind e também da realização desse vídeo que vai ser mostrado, que as perguntas que queiram ser dirigidas no 2º e 3º andar sejam escritas até esse momento, quando elas vão ser recolhidas, para que sejam apresentadas aqui embaixo no 1º andar. Nós também estamos ao vivo, em streaming aberto na internet, para aqueles que estejam em casa, desejosos de ouvir esse momento. For us, it's a very, very, very special honor to have you all here. I think I was saying in Portuguese, I understand, I believe you understood most of what I said, but I said you have the responsibility of building something that has to do so much with healing. Healing for the United States, healing for the world. It's a work that requires a lot of what we call in Hebrew, sechel. We have in the past, in the Bible, when the architect of the temple was appointed, he had to not only care for all the architectural details, but he had to care for the spiritual demands of that specific place. In different circumstances, you also have a job that requires that kind of intelligence and sensitivity. So we're very, very, very honored to have you here in Midrash, and I'm going to pass you the word. Queria só pedir a todos que, por favor, desliguem seus telefones celulares.
I'm going to step away. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be, once again, I've been to Rio several times. It's really one of the most beautiful cities. You're so lucky to live here. It's a gorgeous place. And it's, no, I will stand.
We need you for them.
Really?
I don't know. Precisa para passar lá para cima? Que fique no meio ou não? No, it's okay.
Because I rather that you can look at. And I'm very happy to be at the Midrash Center, a very nice and open institution, and it's very connected to what I want to tell you about my belief in architecture. I start with this small sentence: architecture is a language. And it's actually a midrash, because in Hebrew, a midrash is an interpretation of something. It's a meaning. It's not just the meaning of a text. It's not just the meaning of biblical scripture or commentaries. It's actually in architecture an interpretation of life, because that's what architecture deals with. It doesn't just deal with functions. It deals with the language of the human being. And of course, particularly in the 18th, 19th, 20th century, we've seen the ideology that has reduced human beings to a small entity, to a mass. We see it in politics, we see it in various fields that develop around the world. So I want to reassert that architecture has a humanistic discipline. It's a humanistic discipline. It's part of life. And I have a few words that I've inscribed here, things that I am interested in architecture. One of them is emotion. You know, very often we think of architecture as something very abstract, very intellectual, and it's true. There would be no architecture if architecture was not driven by ideas. But there would be no architecture. There is no architecture without emotion. I think you need the idea and emotion. That is really the story of human beings. And of course, bringing emotion to architecture is not something you can learn from school. It's something that is part of every human being's response to the complexities of the world. And I believe that really from the very first project that I designed, which you might have visited even, I believed in the emotion that sometimes less visible, even inaudible events have on our souls. In Berlin, of course, the destruction of the Jews, the Holocaust, the premonition of genocides that have happened subsequently. I created a kind of a star which I connected through individuals, through dimensions of the city, through long forgotten histories. And you can see that this drawing, that white line, because I entered a competition in 1989 with the wall, the Berlin Wall was still there. But you know, I thought that the division, political division of Berlin, east-west, has nothing to do with the star that shines in Berlin, which is the star of Jewish history. And that is, of course, what I did when I created a building that isn't just referring to itself, to other architectural models, but is really based on music. It is based on an incomplete opera of Schoenberg, Aaron Moses, Arnold Schoenberg, poetry of Paul Celan, stories written by Walter Benjamin. Again, Berliners. And what is the building about? It is to bring a certain sharpness of light into us. It's not just about the light and about the ambience of light, but a light that can penetrate through the opacity of our own beings. And I've created many different spaces, the void, spaces that don't really have conventional windows. These are really slashes along the lost topography, Jewish topography of Berlin, which bring a different kind of light into the museum itself. And of course, also the voids, the emptiness, that is actually the central feature of this building, but an emptiness with a light. And I think that's part of it, that you cannot build anything without a hope, without something that is positive, despite often abysmal events that human beings have experienced and continue to experience. And of course, it is also to transform the city, to bring back to a city, Berlin, a great city, a city that I lived for many years, to bring something that is worthy of its own history, despite and across the devastations of the city. And of course, I'm very happy that subsequently I was able to build the glass court in the Baroque building, which is now a major social space in Berlin. And I'm building the academy, the Learning Academy, which is partly inside of the old Blumenhalle, the old flower market across the street. So again, education, very important that these are living institutions. These are not just buildings, but foster an emotional and an intellectual connection to the past, which is important if we are going to have any future. Now, another word which is grossly misused and almost a cliche, the word innovation. But what does it mean in architecture? How do you innovate not only with technological means, with ecological and sustainable responses, but with lives? And I had a good chance in a project which is just completed in Singapore called Reflections, to create a really, you know, a residential project. It's really housing, high density housing on Keppel Bay. And here I decided that this normal distinction between you know, residential, cultural, museums, public buildings, spiritual buildings, prosaic, it's a completely false distinction, because in life we don't have these divisions. I decided to create, let's say, housing, but give it a spiritual sense. And it's not really just words, because I created 6 towers and about 12, 14 large-scale buildings, about from 7 to 15 stories high, in a composition which is rather unusual, because the towers themselves are not extruded, they are not straight up. It's not more expensive, actually, it's just more difficult to create a tower where every floor plate occupies a different point in space, so that you don't have a direct neighbor below you, nor a direct neighbor above you. You're just slightly off. You're gliding around that line, and then, of course, there are apartments in the crowns of the buildings. They are, of course, green buildings. And they shape, really, a topography of this beautiful area in a completely new tropical way. So, communication. Of course, every building, as far as I'm concerned, is a story. Every city is a story. Even a faceless building, which doesn't tell us anything, tells us that it has nothing to say to us. But it tells us very clearly. So communication is something that I believe is very important in architecture. And I had a good chance that my client was Dr. Voll, a great man, philanthropist who's passed away, unfortunately. He asked me to design a center at the Bar Ilan University, which is fastest growing university in Israel. At the gate of the university, you see the housing around. It's a beautiful place, Ramat Gan. And I created really a building for the students, for the school. It is, you can see, a raised form, which is kind of like a book opened upwards, leaning precariously in a wall. It's a conversation between the wall and the book. And of course, it's an auditorium for more than 1,000 students, 1,000 people, lectures. The building has classrooms, has flexible spaces, has a cafe. So it's really a contribution also in terms of what it is, because a very low-cost building. I think a villa in Rio costs probably more than this building. And the building is really about the life of students. I wanted to leave something behind to create a building that is with local engineers, local workforce, a building that is wrapped in a kind of textuality. It opens to various sort of Hebrew ideas that are spiritually important and even perceptible from within the building. And again, it's a building that I sought to create really a communication between the campus, between the various disciplines. There are students of religion, of biblical studies, but also top scientific institutes. So that's a small, modest, but I think, again, even a small building can change the place, can change the aspect, the aspiration of a place. And of course, I am a believer in unexpected. It's very important. We've gotten used to the fact that everything can be reported on the nightly news. But there is such a thing as the unexpected. And it awaits all of us. And I think one of the things I try to imbue my buildings with is a condition of the unexpected. And of course, what does that mean? I recently completed a building. It's my newest building, just opened in Dresden, in Germany. A city that, as you know, was devastated in the bombings, Allied bombings, 1945. City that was one of the centers of Nazi conquest of Europe. And I was given a chance to, there was a military museum, existing military museum, which existed already 19th century, in 1880, was already a military museum. Then it became, the Kaiser's Military Museum, the Museum of Germany, the Nazi Museum, the Soviet Museum, the East German Museum, and then, of course, after the fall of the wall, the Bundeswehr, the German army, to whom it belongs, had a comment. What do we do with this building? What do we do with this building? Well,